Today I'm going to be breaking down the Alliance Quest Season 8 Apocalyptic Mutiny, the changes, giving my first thoughts and impressions, and commenting a little bit on the rewards. Now that said, as always, there's a link to the forum in the description below if you prefer to read, as well as a copy of my notes for this video, because I have summarized it to, hopefully expedite the process. So just like an overall thing, they are trying to make this next Alliance Quest season very, very centric on mutants. As a result, of course, for every Alliance new season, for Alliance Quest, we see new bosses. So just in general, I'm not going to go through maps 1 through 3, because odds are you're not watching this video, but if you have a particular question about that, if you are someone who's watching this video and you're interested in my thoughts on those, feel free to comment and ask, and I'd be happy to dive into it and take a look. But I'm going to start at just a little bit of map 4 commentary, and that is that map 4 is going to get more aggressive AI. They mentioned that down here. I don't know why at the bottom, but they do. So map 4 AI is going to be slightly more aggressive, which is really, really great. I like AI being updated to more aggressive. It makes them a little more predictable and a lot easier to deal with in general. Additionally, for maps 1 through 5, if you like variation, there will be a rotation of the minis or the minions. This is nice if you like variety, but sucks if you don't like variety and you would prefer consistency. I personally would have preferred consistency. Hey, maybe you're in map 5 and you're like, no, I really like the variety. Let me know. But I do personally think the consistency would have been nicer. That said, the first thing I want to talk about is the map 4 boss changes. So for map 4, they are changing out Dr. Doom for Professor X, and the nodes on Professor X will be Power Alternator and Faltering Mind. Now, this is essentially just power management. You'll have like a brief window, otherwise your power, if you have more than Professor X, will switch with Professor X. Which isn't too big of a deal because he does end up power locking you or power stasising you. So that's not going to come up too much. It's more so the Faltering Mind, which just makes the falter even longer, more of a headache. But again, that's also not as big of a deal compared to the nodes that were on Doom and Doom as a boss. Overall, I think Professor X is a lot easier of a boss. His specials are much easier to dodge. You really just have to worry about the falter, and you also can't quake him. But I'm just going to state that odds are if you're on a map 4 alliance, you're probably not super reliant on quake to take down the boss. Might still be a few of you out there, but you just probably aren't as reliant, like, oh, we need quake to take this boss down. So overall, I think this is a really, really good change to map 4. I'm all for it. Additionally, Silver Surfer is being swapped out for Deadpools. Deadpool, Deadpool X, Goldpool, and Venompool. Now, I don't know if this means, like, there's a whole bunch of them. Maybe I just misunderstood how the map works. I do personally think these Deadpools are easier to handle than Silver Surfer. There will be a little bit of time kind of adjusting to these new nodes, making sure you don't instantly die to a special, because if you don't dex that properly, you are going to get wrecked. But overall, I think they're easier to dex than Silver Surfers as well, so I think that's going to be good for map 4 players as well. So next up, for maps 5, 6, and 7, Doom is being replaced with Apocalypse. And the nodes are all the same for maps 5, 6, and 7. It's Vigor, Empowered Immunity, and Stupefy. Sorry, Vigor, Empowered Immunity, and Stupefy. And then map 7 also has to worry about Cutting Wires, which is essentially like an anti-attrition mastery node here, because essentially when you gain a bleed, robot opponents get a shock instead, but Apocalypse doesn't really apply bleeds super often. At least I don't think he applies them. I'm pretty sure he has access to poison. So it literally is like, oh, by the way, if you run double edge and you bring a robot, you just get a shock at the start of the fight. So yeah, kind of stupid. But other than that, the nodes are all the same. And I have some commentary here. The first bit is that overall, this is a really, really big hit to Quake alliances. I think the just changes here across the board for maps 5, 6, and 7. It really, really feels like they're targeting Quake. And a part of that is Quake was very prevalent in the last season, variant invasions or infiltrations or whatever they're called. So I do think that's a big factor, but also it just feels like they're really hitting Quake hard and they know it. But beyond, the strong Quake reliance, I actually think this is overall better than Doom. A lot better than Doom. Apocalypse is essentially a parry stun immune, but Doom had insane block penetration. So you were pretty much playing the intercept game and relying on alternative openings, Quake in that situation anyways. Except for Doom, you weren't as able to bring in other champions unless they had access to like a slow, or you were really cautious, or maybe power control. It was overall a really, really frustrating fight with not a lot of answers. That's why people were so reliant on Quake. But for Apocalypse, I feel like as long as you can treat the fight as a pseudo stun immune and really, really rely on those intercepts, dexing out his special 1, and you can dex his special 2 as well, I think that a lot of more champions can take on Apocalypse. So minus the Quake, I do think it is a better push forward. The thing I'm really, really questioning there is the Vigor, because that seems a little strong on a boss node, but I'll need to see how much health it is really and whether or not it can be healing reverse cheesed with like Human Torch or Void. Beyond that, I'm not too sure. But overall, I do think Cap Infinity War, maybe Void, maybe Human Torch might be really potentially strong for this Apocalypse boss. I don't know yet. So yeah, overall, I'm gonna say it's pretty mixed. It's a half win, half loss. Just kind of depends on whether or not you're a Quake player. As far as map 5 specifically, they are swapping out Human Torch with Emma Frost. Now, just in general, I actually really, really like swapping out Emma Frost for Human Torch. Personally, I think Emma Frost specials are way easier to dex. And then this node setup here for Emma Frost, I think is pretty reasonable. It's powerful from afar, bulk up, and oscillate. Which means if you're using the likes of like Corvus Glaive, or someone with a really, really good stun, armor break, you could potentially get a lot of free damage from the bulk up. And then the oscillate means that you can relatively predict when she's going to throw her specials. You know, just know that she goes from aggressive to defensive depending on where she is in the oscillate node. The only real major concern I have here is the powerful from afar. It's going to be very, very potentially frustrating with just like L1 spam from Emma Frost. I'm not entirely sure. It just kind of depends on how much power that gain is. But I still think that's going to be way better than the Human Torch. I do know the Human Torch was a major pain in the A, so I do think that's a really positive change. Overall, really like the changes to map 5. Map 6, in addition to the Doom changes, we see Nova in variant 1 being replaced with Bishop. Now, generally speaking, I like Bishop more than I like Nova. Like, I do think Nova is one of the more annoying mini-bosses here. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not a huge fan of Bishop here as the mini-boss. He is soft guard. He already hits really hard in the block. He also has no hit mercy and power focus too. And now Bishop's L1 does a lot of block damage, but he also does a lot of damage with his power, his L2. Power focus 2 means you're going to be eating that a lot. And I just don't know if this is exactly what I want. I'm not going to say that Bishop is worse than Nova, but I definitely feel like this is going to be a mini-boss you do want to bring a proper answer to. I do think that very, very large pool of champions that hard counter Bishop are going to be super useful here, like Doom or Magic or Quake, Ghost. There's a lot of options here. I just personally would have rather seen Power Focus 1 here, as well as, you know, instead of Soft Guard, maybe like, gosh, something different, honestly. Maybe put the Oscillate here instead of Soft Guard, or in Power Focus 1. I know that the L1 is where Bishop's comes in really, really strong with that block pen, but it would allow people to play incredibly aggressive into him, really, really push him into the corner, maybe even stun lock him, and it would have opened up a lot of other options at the cost of additional block damage from the specials. So yeah, but I do think the Power Focus 2 is a lot more deadly. So yeah, not the greatest, but it is map 6, so there should be more frustration, and I do think Bishop is a win over Nova. Overall, I do like that change. And then finally, for map 7, the changes here we see are Sasquatch, where they remove delayed reaction, which I actually like delayed reaction on Sasquatch. I think this is better if you're not quaking him, but if you're quaking him, you like delayed reaction. It was actually really good, because it meant that you don't have to worry as much about the Wrath of Tanarak. So I think that's a hit to us, actually, unless you're someone who's using like Human Torch or Warlock or something for this fight. And then they're dropping the health boost, which was previously 300% to 200%. I think this is like the perfect amount. I didn't feel like he needed a big health reduction, but days 4 and 5, Sasquatch was looking pretty tanky with epic mods. So I'm actually really, really happy about that. But even then, I don't feel like Sasquatch, out of the 3 mini bosses, was the worst. I felt like Thing was the worst. So we're taking a win here on Sasquatch, but let's see what we're losing instead. So next up is Annihilus. They swapped out Annihilus for Magneto, and Annihilus was easy, and this is map 7. So the assumption is you probably have a Quake player, and Annihilus was super easy with Quake. Just an absolutely free Quake fight. And they've swapped it out with Magneto. Now, this Magneto in particular, they've put Polka Dot Power, Sadist, Flux Dispersal, and Physical Resistance 40%. Now, up until the Physical Resistance, totally fine. Magneto is going to be actually really, really reasonable, except for, the anti-Corvus glaive that is inherent in him because of his #metal. But really, this 40% physical resistance, it literally screams anti-Quake. Like, the only reason I could foresee them putting this in here was for anti-Quake. Otherwise, they would have just made him get, like, an armor or something. They would have given him any kind of, like, bonus health or, damage reduction. Instead, they went for physical resistance, which literally targets Quake. Well, almost literally targets Quake, because the next one where we take Magneto House of X, and this is where we potentially had the chance to gain a lot, because you can still Quake this regular Magneto. It's going to be a little bit longer. There might be some timeouts on later days that we have to worry about, but overall you can still Quake that Magneto. It's this variant 3 Magneto that I really, really see as frustrating. This is the Thing replacement, and Thing was the most frustrating mini boss, and I actually think this Magneto House of X is going to be the new most frustrating mini boss. He has Heavy Hitter, Mighty Charge, and this combination, considering that Magneto gets unstoppable from his heavy, and I don't know if the Magneto Marvel House of X does as well. I'm going to try to pop over and check real quick, because I should have checked, but I'm pretty sure on heavy attacks, maybe that's just the regular Magneto, just the regular Magneto. Anyways, but he's unstoppable while holding heavy, and Mighty Charge means that you cannot rely on that long dash parry stun. What that means is, combined with Heavy Hitter, we're going to see a lot of long dash parry, and then he's stun immune, and then he's going to immediately charge a heavy, and he goes unstoppable, so you have to dex back. You cannot punish the heavy, and then there's going to be another long dash, parry, heavy, charge, repeat. That's a pain. That is a massive pain in the A. Especially combined with Power Snack, you're going to be dexing that heavy a lot of times, which means odds are your opening window here is going to be from the L1. And Magneto House of X's L1 is already the more frustrating of the two specials that he has to dex. Just not a very good combination of notes here. I do think this is going to be the most frustrating. It's going to be the most punishing. A good player will be able to work their way around it with just skill, but this does feel like the most skill-focused one, as well as the non-Quake aspect of True Strike. I think if they didn't put True Strike in, he would have been the easiest one by far, just because he's the least tanky, doesn't have the massive health pool of Sasquatch. So they put True Strike in there knowing that fact. I'm not appreciative of it. I think that this is really, really crap. But between Magneto House of X and Thing, it's weird, but I think I would have rather had Thing. At least Thing you could Quake. I'm not a huge fan of taking the Quake options away. And this is where I bring up my second point here, and that is that both of these Magnetos coming to Alliance Quest is something we knew, or combos forecasted, when they added #metal to Corvus Glaive. I think that a lot of people were like, hey, why is Corvus Glaive getting #metal? And you make all kinds of arguments about his big glaive. He literally carries a massive two-handed glaive. And you could make an argument. Like, I'm not saying the #metal doesn't apply, but from an in-game perspective, it was a precursor to double Magneto mini bosses in map 7. Because where does Corvus Glaive reign supreme? Alliance Quest. And how does Kabam make Alliance Quest more challenging? They nerf your options. Ghost, Corvus Glaive, Quake. The 3 most common mini-boss challengers suddenly are not valuable in 2 of the variants. And you could, or significantly reduced value in 2 of the variants. So yeah, I'm just not a fan. It's definitely a very good indirect way to do it. And if you're going to indirectly nerf a champion or indirectly respond to some of the best Alliance Quest options, this is the way to do it. The biggest thing here is just that we're getting, whether or not we're getting value in return, and I don't feel like we are. That's just me. Enough complaining about it though. We will adapt, we will learn. These aren't like the absolute worst. There's just frustrations I can foresee, but definitely ways to work around it. I just wanted to touch on those frustrations because those are the things I noticed, and I 100% am confident that those are the things Kabam was targeting when they developed and designed those mini bosses. They specifically were thinking, how do we respond to Quake? How do we respond to Corvus Glaive? And how do we respond to Ghost? I 100% think that those were the 3 questions on their mind in developing that. And that was a long time coming. So next up, we got global buffs, and these are the new global buffs. So previously we had class ascendancy buffs, which I'm totally glad to see gone. These were super RNG, and I personally felt that the nerf to a specific class hurt a lot more than a buff to a specific class. I didn't really notice the buff, but I definitely feel the nerf. So I'm glad to see that. And in exchange, we're getting a series of rotating mutant buffs. And not all of them are as good as the others, but they're all definitely interesting and will help different lanes depending on what kind of a team you can bring and who you have accessible to you. So the first one is gene splicing. It's a cross fight where if your mutant on your team is affected by a bleed, poison, shock, incinerate, cold snap debuff for 5 seconds total on a fight, similar to the way Apocalypse's debuff immunity works, they purify all of that type of debuff and reduce the potency of any future debuffs of that type by 100% for the next 3 fights. Now this is really cool for all champions except for Omega Red. Omega Red, it has the potential of only being frustrating 1 out of every 4 fights, so it's not the absolute worst. And you still get 5 seconds out of your first fight. So just be mindful that if you're using Omega Red, you're gonna lose your bleed on the first fight, and then the next 3 fights you'll be fine. But this is really cool potentially for a lot of other mutants because it essentially makes them attrition immune. Big point on that bleed, comma poison, at least for 3 seconds. And then after that, the next 3 fights, you'll actually get massive healing from willpower. So there's actually a lot of really, really good potential if you're an attrition, comma willpower player, or you happen to be running like, say, like the acid wash lane, or you happen to be running the incinerate lane. If you tank out that 5 seconds of damage, you'll get 3 seconds of immunity, as well as, just damage resistance that you can heal up with willpower and make up for it in the long run. So I think there's a lot of really, really good potential there. Just kind of got to be careful. I really, really like that one. Even with the hit to Omega, I think this one is really, really, really awesome and has a lot of really good potential. Next up is mutagenic symbiosis. So for each mutant on your team, you gain one of the following abilities, or the following abilities, depending on how many you have. I'm not going to go over these because it's essentially just bonuses to your special attacks, and it's cute, but you got to be able to afford to bring a full mutant team. And map 7 is pretty specific counter-wise / pathing, and so only a few people are going to really, really benefit from this, and when they do, it's just going to be extra damage, and it's going to be nice, but it's not always going to mean that you are better off bringing 3 mutants. Some of the times you're just going to stick with the 2, or even just having 1 mutant on your team for the increase to your offensive power rate. It's going to be nice. And that's all it is. This is probably one of the most tame ones, unless you can get to the 3. Maybe even the 2 with the passive prowess is very active. But overall, as far as design, I don't like this one very much just because of the qualifier that you need to have 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, or 3 mutants, and then the benefits is dependent on that. I really like the benefits where it just benefits the mutant and it doesn't have like a quantity of mutants attached to it, so it's hard for me to get behind that one specifically. Next up is mutiny. This has a cross fight where if you enter into a fight with any mutant without a mutiny passive, you gain 3, which are persistent charges. These grant the attacker bonus to ability accuracy and a passive prowess per charge, and at the end of every fight, regardless of how the fight ends, you lose a charge. This is really cool. This is free ability accuracy, free damage on your specials. Totally awesome, especially since a lot of mutants hit really, really hard with their specials. See Emma Frost, see Havoc. I think this is a lot of really, really good potential, and it's just nice because it just applies to all mutants. Absolutely, absolutely love it. Next up is exercise. This one has a solid amount of increased damage. So hashtag X-Men tagged attackers gain a 100% chance to gain 1 second unblockable passive when launching a special attack. And if it breaks the opponent's block, you gain a passive fury, passive 1500 fury for 10 seconds. This is nice. This is really, really good, especially if you're good at the ghost method of dash back special to hit into a forced block. super, super awesome. And again, applies to all hashtag X-Men. Not all X-Men are mutants, so it's going to be a little bit of a broader range. We might even see other champions that we don't typically see, pop up in AQ and become super, super relevant. I think one example is Longshot, pulling it up now. One example is Longshot. Another really good example might be Magic, if you happen to use her for that power control. Phoenix is an AQ staple, really, really good there. And if you're bringing Phoenix and Emma Frost, you're double dipping on that. So a lot of really, really good benefit for that one on the hashtag X-Men. And the next up is Escalation. Clever. Based on the number of hashtag X-Men tag champions on your team, hashtag X-Men attackers gain the following benefits when the opponent is knocked down. So you can gain a vigilance passive, a true accuracy passive, and then unblockable special attacks. And this is again applied based on having a certain number of X-Men on your team, which I'm not a super big fan of. I mean, it is nice and this will be super helpful, but unfortunately there's no real damage benefit to it, so the value of it is really dependent on the pathing, and there's only a handful of pathing where this is super useful. And it will be super useful, and it will be nice to have, but I question whether or not that makes it worth bringing X-Men over like your just standard Quake or Ghost or something to respond to, with vigilance and true accuracy. I don't know. Overall, I think Escalation and Mutagenic Symbiosis are my two least impressive nodes. Mutagenic Symbiosis might be super amazing if you could hit the mutant requirement, but Escalation, it's tough for me to get behind. It seems so niche and doesn't actually have any real damage value. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about the 5. The other 3 I'm super stoked for. I think look really, really good. And then, of course, a global one that will be permanently is K Mike. I 100% think this is supposed to be K Mike, like Meyeke, like Kabam Mike from the forums. 200% Fury for Cyclops dabbing. Thank you, Cat Murdoch, for the awesome artwork. Super cool. But this is a meme. I don't think 200% Fury is enough. I'm just gonna throw it out there. 200% Fury on Cyclops doesn't even make me think about ranking up or even bringing Cyclops into AQ for a second. But hey, prove me wrong. I hope someone out there proves me wrong. Let me see it in map 7 with epic mods though, because if it's not map 7 epic mods, I'm just not convinced. But it's cute. It's definitely cute. I definitely think it would have been nice though if instead of like a troll, we had just gotten like a bonus Fury, like 20% Fury to all hashtag X-Men, all hashtag mutant champions in general. That would have been cool. You want to talk about a global buff that just incentivizes bringing a mutant, that would have been it. But small things. What do I know? I'm just a gamer. And then finally, rewards. Something I'm sure people are really, really interested in. And this is where I will allude to my notes. I'll pull them over because this is just, all kinds of crazy. So I've got a short break here on the notes. So the first part is that for Thronebreaker, Tier 1 Alpha, Tier 4 Basic are cheaper. Tier 5 Basic, Tier 2 Alpha are the same price, but they give more, and they've added Tier 5 Class Catalysts. 5% for 2,700. It's a bit steep on the cost, but will still probably be the most valuable buy for Thronebreaker players. Sadly, Potions, Revives, etc., same cost, no potency change. Cavalier and Uncollected have been lumped together, which means Cavalier players, you drew the short straw here. But there are still benefits here. Uncollected, you guys get a big boost. But Cavalier, short straw, small benefits are Tier 1 Alpha and Tier 4 Basic are still cheaper. Not as cheap as Thronebreaker, but still cheaper. And then Tier 2 Alpha is the same price, but gives more on the same level as Thronebreaker. So if you're looking for Tier 2 Alpha, you're in the same boat. Note that here there is no change to Tier 5 Basic, and I'm going to argue that for Cavalier players, that's the resource they really needed a bump to. That's just me. Tier 5 Basics is really the difference between you pushing Cavalier and Thronebreaker. Tier 2 Alpha, not so much. Tier 2 Alpha is a lot more readily accessible, so I'm very disappointed to see that. If anything, I'd honestly rather have seen it go the other way around. I do know Tier 2 Alpha hits more of a variety on the roster, but just talking about pushing to the next milestone, I think is the other way around. So yeah, it says a lot about where Kabam wants to push the game. It does seem that they probably want people to push through Uncollected a lot faster and hit Cavalier a lot faster, which is to be expected as the game progresses. I expect they want players to get to later stages of the game faster so they can keep on pace and they don't have to have this broad spectrum of players. And then note that there is no 5% Tier 5 CC in Cavalier/Uncollected. I know that's a big pain point for a lot of people. I personally am on the side that I think it makes sense. I don't think this means you need to rush to rank up a rank 3. Don't rank 3 a bad 6-star. Stand by my same point. If you're at a point in the game where you have rank 3 materials or you have 6 stars worth rank 3 and you don't, or you're missing the other piece, wait it out. It's really not worth forcing. You know, you might think that you're missing out, but you're not. Those resources aren't going anywhere until you use them. Don't rank up a meme champion like, you know, Groot, just because you want to get Thronebreaker. You're going to be sad when it takes you still another 7 months to form another Cosmic Catalyst, and you're missing out. Just wait for a decent champion. And this might expand the pool of decent champions. You know, you might start eyeballing Ronin instead of only looking for Nick Fury. Or you might start eyeballing Silver Surfer and shooting for that prestige rank up instead of waiting for Captain Marvel movie or Corvus Clave. I'm just saying, don't pull on a bad champion just because you want to get Thronebreaker. Just wait. And if you're like, okay, well, how am I supposed to get to the Tier 5 CC if I'm not pulling it from Glory? It's not there for you. Remember, this game has a lot of different stages. There's nothing wrong with being Cavalier. If you're missing the rest of the pieces, you know, you just got to keep on playing, push out Arena, grind content, slowly work on Abyss, and you'll get there eventually. There's no hassle. You're not being penalized for waiting. You're just not getting early access like other people who either wailed or hardcore grinded. It'll come. Just be patient. That's really what I want to emphasize there. And feel free to argue with me if you think I'm wrong. That's just my stance. And then finally is that we see Tier 5 CC in rank rewards. This doesn't pass the top 30 alliances. It's like 16% at rank 1 and like 4% at rank 30. I would have liked to see this push the top 90, seeing like 2% up to the top 90, but it does tell me that Kabam wants to see Tier 5 CC still be this like limited resource, and while they want to push it out more to keep the interest of the endgame players, they are very slowly doing so, or I think as slow as they possibly can. I really feel like they're doing it very slowly in order to prevent like a flood or an inflation in the value of the resource in general. But do keep in mind that alliances past the top 30 still have access to that potentially 10% Tier 5 CC on a weekly basis just from pushing epic mods. I know my alliance is not top 30 and we see Tier 5 CC. So that does add up over time. And again, as far as pushing Thronebreaker, the main resource for that is supposed to be Abyss of Legends completion, Comet Exploration, and Act 6 Exploration. So it'll come. It'll come with time, and Book 2 is going to make a big difference on rewards. So yeah, that's it. Those are my love-hate thoughts on the AQ Season 8. Let me know if I missed something, whether or not you disagree. I'm always down to hear other people's thoughts. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.